Was, John, that you mentioned a very disturbing fact, that the United States of America has the highest amount of people incarcerated globally and worldwide, and that our numbers continue to get higher. Should we as individuals and as a nation, should we be concerned about this fact?
Are any of your family members in prison?
Not currently.
Friends?
Probably, yes.
So with that large number of people, that's almost at least 1 or 2 out of 100 people. So it makes it now so most people know somebody who is either been in prison or is in prison, which is kind of significant. And I didn't know that either, so I started doing research in one of my cases and saw that, wow, there are a lot of people who are in prisons or jails in the United States, more than any other country in the world, including China, which is still rather a totalitarian government. So I thought it was significant in our democracy, of the people, for the people, and by the people. Why are so many people in prison? And then if you go one level further down into it, most of the people who are in prison are either people of color or people who are poor. And then you wonder, well, geez, why are all these people in prison and everybody else who has the opportunity to perhaps mount a legal defense can avoid prison? And you see that the legal system is run or based on what a lot of the world is based on, is money. So if you have more money, then you can have more legal defense, which means you're less likely to end up in prison. So I do help people, and I enjoy helping people, but I do get paid too. And so there's that aspect of it. But I do think that it's something that not a lot of people know about, and I think the more people who know about it, then maybe they would do something about it or look at why so many people are in prison.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, could you give us some of your background on how you started on this path? How you became an attorney?
Sure.
What inspired you?
So I think, like I said, I like helping people, and I would say this is probably my third career is lawyer. I started off as a soldier. I was an officer in the Air Force, and I did that for several years. I then worked for some big companies doing things, and when the Cold War was over, I decided to go to law school. That was in the late 80s. I went to law school and graduated in the 90s. And I also had another degree. I did an MBA degree. And I then was out of law school. I think I always wanted to be a lawyer. And I kind of put it off. When I was in the military, I was doing other things that weren't law related, and I was thinking about going to law school, and I kind of put it off. And then finally I had the chance to do that. And since I became a lawyer, one of the things I've tried to do is help people and use my skills, whatever they may be, to help people extract themselves from problems, and at the same time be able to support myself and my family. And I'm grateful that I'm able to do that. That part of it I like, the entrepreneurial aspect of law. The other part to it that I didn't really know I would like so much until I started doing it is helping people who are kind of the underdog or who may not be able to, you wouldn't think at first that they would really have a case, or they might not be able to articulate their case or their claims in a way that they need to in order to get justice. And so I like that part of it too, because when it comes down to it, even today in 2010, in law, when you're representing somebody, it comes down to the two attorneys in court and a judge. And it could be 2010 or it could be 1910. I mean, it's pretty much involving an ability to articulate law, to analyze problems, and then persuade people as to your position based on the facts and law of a case. So that's kind of what I like to do, and I found this profession after doing other things, but I've enjoyed it. And I think that it's important, too, to recognize that there's a lot of lawyers. There's so many lawyers. But even with all the lawyers, there's not all that many lawyers who don't work for the government or who don't work for the insurance company. A lot of them work for those two big, giant organizations. And so when you take all of them out, what's left? How many lawyers are there for the people? And I like to think of myself as being one of those who's for the people. I think part of it is the money. I mean, it would seem that in order to have these broad issues of change that would have to start with addressing why are so many people so poor, why do such a small percentage of the population of the United States control so much wealth, why not share some, why not share the wealth, give everybody a better life while they're here in this world, instead of having such a me system. I think that's part of it. It's just such a broad social change, and once this is the system, it's hard to change systems. And this is our government. I mean, you know, I guess you could write your congressman or something about that. Maybe that'll help you.
Okay. Is there a choice by the prosecutors, parole or hard time, that could change the statistics and still benefit the community? And can you talk a little bit about, would that help to lower the excessive use of services and the cost to incarcerate an individual?
The prosecutors. The prosecutors, yes. I know a lot of prosecutors. I've had a lot of experience dealing with them in court. And by the time they get to that point where they're going to make a decision, you said parole or probation, that falls under what's called sentencing. And so in any sort of criminal prosecution, there's two phases to this. And the first, we'll say, is the proving the crime or the guilt determination. And that's done usually by way of a jury trial. And it's an adversarial system. The prosecutors are, their job is to prosecute people who break the law. And they get their information from the police, and if they see that a person has broken the law, then they're supposed to prosecute them. They're attorneys who work for the government. That's their job. They're a little bit different, though. In any sort of law litigation, it's an adversarial system where you want to win. The attorney for you wants to present your case in a way that you can win, and so the prosecutors are like that. That's what they have to do. That's their duty as lawyers. But they also have a special duty that lawyers in other sorts of litigation don't have. And that's a duty to seek justice, because once again, they're public employees. They work for the government. All of us pay our taxes and pay their paychecks with that. And as a result, their job is not only to prosecute people who break the law, but they're supposed to seek justice. And in their quest for justice, they prosecute people who do bad things that are illegal, and then they also have to penalize people when they're found guilty. But before they ever get to the penalty phase, they have to be very cautious in how they bring these cases against people. And oftentimes the prosecutors forget about that role they have to seek justice, and they'll just prosecute people because they're supposed to prosecute them. And I think they lose sight of the fact that they have this special role of seeking justice in addition to just prosecuting people. So by the time you ever get to the decision of whether they're going to be on probation or parole, the prosecutors have already made so many other decisions that when they get to the second phase, which is sentencing. So we talked about the guilt determination phase. That's the first. And then the second phase would be sentencing in a criminal case. And the prosecutors really don't have a whole lot of discretion. They have some, but in criminal law, each of the crimes is articulated by the legislature in whatever state you are. Whether you're in Washington State or Hawaii, there's a book of laws, and within the book it says all these things that people shall not do. If you do that, then you've broken the law and you've committed a crime. And so once that's happened and you're convicted of that, there's other laws that say what the penalty is for that crime. And the legislature has decided that, and the prosecutors have to carry that out. And then within that charter from the legislature, they have a little bit of discretion. So, for example, if you got convicted of a Class C felony where the maximum penalty is 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, they then have on top of that statutory maximum a sentencing guideline that the legislature has determined. It's the same way in Hawaii. They look at each crime in the law books that the legislature has written up, and each crime has its specific sentencing guideline where you have to sentence somebody within these 2 points, and that's the discretion the prosecutor has. They also don't really have much discretion over probation or parole or other sorts of less restrictive alternatives to being locked up in jail, because the legislature also dictates those. So what's the point of all this? Probably there is some discretion. Some things can be looked at, but it's the legislature that needs to be focused on. And that's who you would need to bring your pitch to ask them to look at these various crimes and the penalties associated with them, and do we really want to do this to people, or maybe we want to have some alternatives to just locking them up or putting them on probation for so long. That would be the best. That probably would make the most progress there, but unfortunately it's really hard to get elected if you're considered to be soft on crime, because you're back full circle again to the people who have the money, whether it's in Washington State or Hawaii. They don't.
One of the conversations we had the other day, you talked about people who can't afford a lawyer, or the poor, and the reality of the right to counsel, and that usually someone is appointed a court lawyer, but that possibly it doesn't always mean that it's good and adequate counsel. So is it really a level of service that's equal for the individual?
You mean between an appointed counsel and a hired private attorney? My opinion would be no, and most people you talk to would probably have that opinion. I mean, look at probably the most notable case is O.J. I mean, O.J. was on television with all of his lawyers, and how did he get so many lawyers? Well, he had a lot of money from being a really good football player, and he spent all that on his lawyers, and he avoided getting convicted of murder. So if he didn't have any money and he was just some guy who had the same name and the same skin color, but he worked at a meatpacking plant in East LA, do you think he'd gotten acquitted? I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to see, but he might not have. And so it's unfortunate because the way the model is set up now, everybody gets a lawyer when you're charged with a crime, and if you don't have enough money, the government will provide one for you, which in theory is a great system, and in some places it's better than others. I think it kind of varies by where you're at, but what happens in a lot of places, the major metropolitan areas, it once again comes down to money, and the government doesn't have endless amounts of money. They only have so much money to spend on the appointed counsel, and the appointed counsel, the public defenders, oftentimes they get a bad rap, because someone will say, well, geez, my public defender screwed up my case. Well, maybe or maybe not. The public defenders are actually really good attorneys. They're excellent attorneys. The problem they have is they've been saddled with so many cases that really nobody can do any better than they're doing. And what happens is they're given so many cases, there's only so many hours in a day or in a week, and at the end of the week, with all the cases they have, they just simply can't put the time on any individual case that it needs. And that's what a lot of this is preparation, it's analyzing facts, it's poring over documents, it's going to crime scenes, it's interviewing witnesses, and doing this multiple times. And so if your time is limited, and you only can give a tiny little bit of time to each person because you've got so many persons that your government overseers have given you to represent, the question becomes, is that really fair? I mean, is that is it fair to the public defender attorneys? Is it fair to the person who they're given that attorney? And is that really a satisfaction of your constitutional right to legal counsel? And so it's just how it is in this day of diminishing budgets. You have to accept what you have. If you don't have money, then you have to do your best with what you've been given.
So is it important then, if you do get like a point-of-court attorney, to understand the facts in the law of your case?
I would say so. The more you can understand them, the better, because you might be able to help your court-appointed attorney. And, for example, if they don't have time to go to a crime scene and you have pictures of it, or you're lucky enough to be out of jail on bail, and you can go there and take measurements or look at things, or ask people who were around when something happened, or the police say something happened, the more help you can give them, the better off you'll be. And I mean, I would say the ones who are more experienced would probably like that. The ones who maybe think that they should be doing all this might initially say, wait a minute, I'm supposed to do that. Well, yeah, but if you can do that, great. But if not, I'm really willing to help. And so if you can do that, or if you can get friends to help you, sure, I think that's a great idea. And there's studies been done. There's studies that have been published in the Seattle Times, also in the Vancouver Columbian newspaper, which is in Clark County, another very populous county interstate. So those are some examples, and it's not like that in every case, but in some cases, the times can be that short. And right now, there's a shortage of attorneys. There's a shortage of public defenders. There's also becoming a shortage of prosecutors because of their budget cuts. They're laying off prosecutors.
So do you think there needs to be some accountability or some different things in the legislature to look at this concern? Because is everyone treated the same, and is the outcome or the sentencing equal? Justice for everyone? For all?
That's the way it's supposed to be, but the reality is people of color oftentimes are prosecuted more than people who are not of a racial minority. Also, like I said, it seems that people who may be poor have more legal problems than those who are well off. People who are well off seem to be able to extract themselves easier from the web of legal prosecution in a criminal case. And I guess what it means is right now we have a lot of laws. If the state governments, whether it be Hawaii or Washington State or the city of Seattle, they have all these laws. If they're not going to have enough people to participate in the process, that would be public defenders or prosecutors, then they might want to look at being careful as to which crimes they actually charge. And that's already happening in the city of Seattle. They've essentially decriminalized pot charges. The city, the mayor, has instructed the police that even though this is a law, they're to give that the lowest priority and fight crime in all other areas before they get to that. So that has diminished the amounts of prosecutions in those areas and hopefully increased the police focus on other more serious crime. So if you look at that example, you could take that to other extents, to other sorts of criminal conduct that the legislature says is illegal, but maybe we don't have the resources to prosecute that, so we're not going to prosecute those at this time. We just can't. That's one way they can handle it.
How do you know a lawyer or an attorney will do his due diligence to get justice for his client? What advice would you give someone as they're looking to hire, or whether, if it's a court appointed, what can they do to help keep that measure?
Well, I think when you want an attorney, when you're looking for an attorney to represent you, it's got to be somebody who, one, you trust, and two, somebody who knows what they're doing, and somebody who is committed to working for you and fighting for you. And how will you know that if you've never encountered or worked with that person before? You really don't. One way you can find out is through referrals. You could talk to other people who had to have an attorney or had a legal problem and find out who they had to help them with that. And that's probably the best way, is a personal referral, either a friend or family member who had a legal problem and hired an attorney. You can also, if you're involved with an appointed counsel, you generally don't get to choose your appointed counsel, but I think in some cases, if you just don't have a good match with your personalities, you might want to early on bring that to the attorney's attention and just say, hey, you know what, I can tell already this is not going to work. Is there somebody else who might be better able to fit with my personality? Something like that, and deal with it early on, because when you're involved with a legal problem like this, it's very stressful. It's two, going to be life-altering. If you're charged with a crime, it could be a life-altering event, and you really want to know that the person who's helping you is going to do everything they possibly can to help you. Because win or lose, you at least want to know you gave it your best shot. And that's where, if you have somebody who has been referred to you, whether it be a private attorney or a public defender, would be the best bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can we create more dialogue to bring awareness of some of these facts, of how people are demoralized and continue to be hampered in, it's like an extended sentence that happens.
Well, I think you have to talk about it. You have to get the message out and not be afraid to talk about it, not be afraid to bring it up, because I know many of my colleagues would never bring it up because they wouldn't want the judge to get mad at them, or they wouldn't want to risk that, or they'd think that the judge would get mad at them and give their client more time. But I guess that's up to the individual attorney and trying to understand that judge and what the facts of your case are. But I think information to get the word out and for people to have knowledge about this, once again, if you have knowledge of this, you can use that knowledge to your advantage. And if nobody's going to want to talk about it, it'll be kept secret. And I'm sure that the people running these jails aren't very proud of that. But that does happen. And I know that it happens. It's happened right here in King County. And I've represented people who were in the jail who had that happen to them. And so in a case like that, that's not a criminal case, that's a civil case. And I represented people who have brought cases against the jail guards for misconduct, including sexual misconduct. And that's what you have to do. You have to hold the government accountable.